When you think of New York City during World War II, what comes to mind? Maybe it's the iconic VJ Day kiss in Times Square, sailors on leave, or victory parades. These images are powerful, but they only tell a fraction of the story. The real engine of wartime New York was not just on the front lines or in the ticker tape parades. It was humming in the factories, bustling in the shipyards, and pulsing through the city's veins, powered by millions of women whose stories have been largely forgotten. Today, we're going beyond the black and white photos to uncover the incredible, untold stories of the women who truly kept New York running during its most critical hour. Let's start at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Before the war, it was a man's world. But as men shipped out, the city faced a massive labor crisis. Who would build the battleships, the aircraft carriers, the very vessels needed to win the war? The answer was women, tens of thousands of them. They weren't just secretaries. They were welders, electricians, machinists, and shipfitters. Imagine stepping into that noisy, sprawling, and often dangerous environment for the first time. These women, many of whom had never held a tool heavier than a kitchen utensil, learned complex trades in a matter of weeks. They were nicknamed Winnie the Welders and Rosie the Riveters. And they weren't just filling jobs. They were mastering them. They faced skepticism and outright hostility. Foremen doubted their strength, and male coworkers often saw them as temporary novelties. But they proved everyone wrong. These women weren't just assembling parts. They were innovators. They developed new techniques to work in tight spaces. Their smaller frames often an advantage. They worked grueling shifts, often juggling childcare and household duties on top of their demanding jobs. They endured freezing winters and sweltering summers inside metal hulls, all while dealing with the constant fear for their loved ones overseas. Their paychecks gave them a newfound sense of independence, but their real reward was knowing that every rivet they hammered was a direct contribution to the war effort. The USS Missouri, the very ship where the Japanese surrender was signed, was built right there in Brooklyn, by their hands. But the Navy Yard was just one piece of the puzzle. The entire city was a hive of female-led activity. Let's head over to what was then called Floyd Bennett Field. This was a critical naval air station, and here, women took on another groundbreaking role. They became waveswomen accepted for volunteer emergency service. They weren't just clerks. They were aviation mechanics, control tower operators, and parachute riggers. Think about the level of trust and responsibility placed on them. A pilot's life depended on a parachute packed by a wave, or an engine meticulously inspected by one. They worked around the clock, ensuring that planes were ready to fly and pilots were safe. These were highly technical jobs that required immense focus and skill, and these women stepped up without hesitation. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, the city's transportation system was on the verge of collapse. The subways, buses, and ferries were essential for moving millions of workers. But the male workforce had been depleted. So, for the first time, women took the controls. They became bus drivers, subway conductors, and ticket agents. Commuters, used to seeing only men in these roles, were initially surprised, but quickly came to rely on these pioneering women. They kept the city moving, ensuring that every other part of the war machine, from the factories to the ports, could function. They navigated the city's complex routes, managed massive crowds, and worked long, irregular hours. Their work was less glamorous than building battleships, but it was just as vital. Wetumptim, New York would have ground to a halt, and let's not forget the home front, which was a battlefield in its own right. New York women led the charge in civil defense. They became air raid wardens, learning how to enforce blackouts and guide people to shelters. They volunteered for the Red Cross, rolling bandages, preparing care packages, and donating blood. They organized and ran massive scrap metal and rubber drives, scouring their homes and neighborhoods for materials that could be recycled into weapons and tires. The victory gardens that sprouted up in parks, backyards, and even on rooftops were largely tended by women. A crucial effort to combat food shortages. Every can of vegetables they grew, every pound of scrap metal they collected, was a tangible blow against the enemy. They were the logistical masterminds of the home front, organizing their communities with incredible efficiency. The war also opened up entirely new professional doors. Wall Street, the bastion of male finance, began hiring women as traders and analysts in the city's hospitals. With so many doctors and male nurses serving overseas, women took on more responsibilities, paving the way for future generations in medicine. They became journalists, radio broadcasters, and scientists, their voices and minds contributing to the national conversation and technological advancement. These weren't just jobs, they were incursions into previously barred territories, and these women proved they were more than capable. They weren't just keeping a seat warm, they were excelling and reshaping the very definition of women's work. But what happened when the war ended and the men came home? That famous kiss in Times Square marked a moment of national jubilation. But for many of these women, it was a bittersweet turning point. The expectation was clear. Return to the kitchen. Give the jobs back to the returning soldiers. Many were laid off from the factories and shipyards. The female bus drivers and subway conductors were replaced. The emergency was over, and so, it seemed, was their time in the workforce. For some, this was a welcome return to normalcy, but for many others, it was a frustrating step backward. They had proven their skills, experienced financial independence, and felt the pride of contributing in such a direct way. The world had changed, and so had they. They couldn't just unlearn their capabilities or forget their ambitions. This experience, this taste of a different life, planted a seed. The women who welded ships in Brooklyn and maintained planes at Floyd Bennett Field didn't just go home and forget. They raised their daughters with a new sense of what was possible. The skills, confidence, and expectations they gained during the war were passed down. The fight for equal pay, for professional respect, for a woman's right to choose her own path. The roots of the modern feminist movement were watered by the experiences of these women. They were the unsung pioneers who quietly challenged the status quo, not through protests, but through their daily work. Their wartime service became a powerful, personal argument for equality that would echo for decades. So next time you see a picture of wartime New York, look beyond the soldiers and sailors. Picture the thousands of women in overalls, their hands greasy from engine oil. Picture the air raid warden on a dark street corner, the conductor on a crowded subway car, the volunteer rolling bandages late into the night. These women are the forgotten architects of victory. They didn't just support the war effort. They were the war effort, right here at home. Their legacy isn't just in the ships they built, but in the barriers they broke and the future they helped shape for all of us. Their stories deserve to be told, remembered, and celebrated. Thanks for watching. If you found these stories as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments which story surprised you the most. See you next time.